the main topic we're going to discuss is how do you prioritise cybersecurity investments at a time of rising business costs? Now, I don't know if anybody knows you, but the current Collins Dictionary word of the year is permacrisis. Basically, we seem to be staggering from one cock-up to another in succession, with no direction where we're going. And the reason I say this is because I think everybody in this room is agreeing cybercrime and cybersecurity are growing issues. Yet, for any board, this is just but one of a number of issues which is hitting them at the same time. They've got to deal with issues with staff, interest rates, rates as regards currencies and so forth. There's supply chains. There's so much trying to get to them. So the question is, how do you get them to believe this is the thing they need to be looking at? And to answer the questions, we have our panel, who are going to introduce themselves very quickly, one by one. Just name, rank, and serial number.
Hi, I'm Abbie Vlahakis. I'm CEO of Millennium Point.
Mark Lomas, Cloud Solutions Architect at Probrand.
Good afternoon, I'm James Jackson. I'm the CIO of the NEC Group.
Hello, I'm Junaid Arshad. I'm the Head of Department at Networks and Cybersecurity Department at BCU.
Hi, I'm John Cochran, CIO for Platform Housing Group.
Hello, I'm David Hall. I'm a lawyer and a principal associate at Mills Reeve. I specialise in data and digital.
So you're the vastly costly person our previous speaker was speaking about.
I am the one that knows how to invoice, yeah, until you look at premiums.
I'm going to start with Mark, if I can. Put this in context, which is the trouble with cybersecurity and cybercrime is there are so many figures flying around. You can pick anyone you choose, but the one I choose to get the conversation going was $10 trillion by 2025. I think that gives an idea of the scale of the threat, but going back earlier, what's happening as regards the range and complexity of what's hitting businesses at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's you talk about those sort of trillions of dollars figures. You start to get into those numbers that are very difficult for our human minds to comprehend, really. It's like
more than there are stars in the galaxy.
Yeah, it's like trying to understand, space distances and things like this. It's very difficult for us to sort of get our head around. But really, again, going back to that previous speaker, there's an element here of you see that kind of timeline, you see those kind of scenarios, and your sort of first instinct is, well, I'd like to have that not happen in the first place, if possible. I don't want to be in the position of having to make the claim or having to clean up the mess afterwards. I want to be avoiding that happening in the first place. So you've got to kind of bring it back down to earth a little bit and think about your own organization, your own business, and what's going to be a problem for you. What would be the risk of losing access to your own data? Is this going to mean that if you're in retail, you're going to be having to close your stores because you simply can't operate anymore? If you're in manufacturing, is that going to be downing tools because you just can't operate your systems anymore? Now, when it comes to the complexity of the threat that is facing us, obviously these things do evolve over time. The nature of the threat changes. And as we move our systems, as we evolve the way that we run IT, so you look at the big change that's happened over the last decade, there's a lot more cloud. We've moved a lot more of our systems from on-premises traditional systems to hosted cloud solutions, whether they be managed for us, things like software as a service, or whether we're taking advantage of hyperscale clouds using infrastructure and platform as a service. We've shifted a lot of the way that we do IT. Now, hackers move with the times as well. They know that we've moved our infrastructure, they know where we've put it in many cases, and they're going to go after that. Perhaps not by exploiting vulnerabilities in those platforms, because you're using Microsoft as your Google, they're going to be pretty hot on closing vulnerabilities, on looking for bugs, but they're going to be looking at other ways that they might be able to exploit the nature of the way that we're using those platforms. So we move with the times, we move with the technologies. The hackers are going to as well, and that means you do have to keep up.
Because this picks something we were discussing the other day, which is go back to the cliche. I'm putting myself in the mind of not so much a chief technology or an information officer, but in the mind of a managing director or chief executive. There's two cliches which exist. One is the sort of bedroom hacker, still, it's a game for them. And the sophisticated mafiosi somewhere in some obscure Central Asian country, most of us have difficulty placing on the map. But you say it's changed with the growth of ATPs is perhaps one of the biggest threats, particularly if you're a small organisation?
Yeah, I think what makes the headlines is usually ransomware and quite sophisticated hackers. But I think that we also need to think about what we call as commodity threats, which is low-level kind of attacks which are readily accessible because there's a lot of exploits available on dark web, right? And a lot of people who are maybe genuinely curious may have readily access to those things. And that kind of defines the commodity threat, and that probably is bigger threat than the APTs or those fancy kind of sophisticated attacks. And I think on the other side as well, commodity threats may be easier to protect against as well. The previous speaker.
Can you describe more about commodity threats?
Commodity threat, for example, having a secure password, having a properly configured firewall, right? So that there's no open ports, for example, or your file server is protected by a password, but also only accessible to your own employees who can be authenticated, right? Very simple things like this. And having cyber hygiene measures in place, such as you have a strong password, which is at least 3 words and a sentence or a phrase, rather than having something which you can't even remember. So those kind of things, those very, very simple and basic principles are, I think, really, really effective in actually achieving a foundation of secure enterprise. And that's, I think, should give you some peace of mind.
David, I could see you nodding at there at one point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the source of problem of cyber incident is broadly twofold. It's accident and attack. And the excellent presentation from Marsh picked this up as well. There is the people element that is often forgotten because we get attracted by the shiny, tinsely technology element. The people element is equally challenging. People are complicated and organisational cultures are challenging, but at least they're within doors and within our reach. There's an awful lot we can do to reduce the incidence of accident, and actually in doing so to improve awareness and cyber hygiene, which I think is a brilliant phrase, and all of these help to deal with the attack front as well.
The culturist thing wants to come on to in a bit, but Karen, talking with you, John, is something. Sorry, James, is something we were talking earlier about. It's not just usual thing. For example, you're saying one of the big problems you have is with bots. And if you can tell the Conservative Party conference one as well, but that's up to you.
Yeah, we'll come back to Conservative. I think it's what is cyber and what is a cyber risk. We run the Ticket Factory as well as the NEC and the arenas. Our biggest issue in Ticket Factory is bots. We sell P2K last week. God help anyone that tried to buy a P2K ticket. We had 4.9 million HTTP requests at 9 o'clock. Over 80% of them were bots. And within 5 minutes of P2K going on sale, secondary market was selling P2K tickets for over £2,000, ripping off our customers and everyone like that. To me, that's cyber. And the biggest risk to us is we take a huge amount of abuse for that. So the Ticket Factory, we do everything we can to block bots. We absolutely do not support the third-party market. But everyone buys from them, and everyone wants to watch P2K. That's our biggest reputational impact. So someone buys a Ticket Factory ticket from a third party, we're attacked on that, and that's our biggest risk.
Which that's a real thing, because again, there's a perception that with most attacks are isolated to it. It's the one-off here, there, but you sound as though it's a mass assault on you at the same moment from different sources.
And it's all over the place. We did concert for Ukraine. So the Ukraine war happened, the concert happened at Resorts World Arena in the NEC. We put the concert on in 14 days. We made no money out of that. It's a fantastic event. When the tickets went on sale, we had attacks from Russia. We had attacks from the Ukraine. We had attacks from all over the world. We had attacks from bots. We had third-party sellers wanting to buy tickets and rip off the people that were paying money to go to it. Then the event happened. People don't really attack you, but what they want to do is turn your lights off. Because you turn the lights off for Resorts World Arena, the event stops. You turn the lights off here today, this event stops. You
Okay,
turn,
we can carry on in the dark.
yeah, you turn off the you turn off the telephone systems. We won't be able to open the front doors because of the concert. So when you talk about cyber, the actual risk to the NEC group, forget hacking Sage, forget coming in and getting our HR systems. The reputational damage of impacting our events is huge. And we're a little old company. The NEC's not great, huge. We run a few arenas. We've run the NEC, run the Ticket Factory. But we put on the Conservative Party conference. We put on the shooting show, the Great British Shooting Show. We put on Crufts. So Crufts happens, isn't it fantastic? Lots of dogs, they're on the TV, isn't it fantastic? Animal rights try and hack us. They absolutely want to take our lights down, they want to turn the heating off, they want to do everything they want to do. So they're the kind of incidents and they're the kind of things that happen.
So basically, it's different event, different
Different
attack.
things on everything you are. Protecting our email services, fingers crossed, is fairly simple and fairly easy. Protecting our world from those people that want to impact our reputation, and that's the big thing. You take down the Ticket Factory, reputation's gone, end of that business. You impact the ICC when Oracle are there today, Oracle will never return to us. That's the bit that people underestimate. And our board is fantastic because they absolutely understand. Yeah, the roof leaks, never mind, we'll move you to another hall. You absolutely breach our infrastructure and turn our lights off, or turn our sprinklers on, or turn our heating off in the winter. That's what kills our business. And that's what people are attacking every day.
So Abbie, I could see you nodding a lot through that, going, yes, yes, me too.
Yeah, no, I think reputation is actually one of the biggest concerns in terms of cybersecurity. And you want to make sure that you have everything in place to protect, especially client data, to actually go out and notify your clients that somebody has hacked your systems and their data, personal data is gone. It's just something that I think is something I just don't want to be in that position. But if I'm ever put in that position, because you quite rightly say, whatever steps we take, the hacker is behind getting even better. I want to be able to sleep at night knowing that we've done everything, absolutely everything possible to stop that from happening. So reputation, I think, is because it takes a long time to build a reputation, but it can drop like that.
Sure. I'm going to you, John, as well, because how can I put this? Again, discussion earlier. I want to come back to the main question in a moment of how do you prioritise cybersecurity. But you struck me as though you were sort of, your big danger was being the innocent victim of almost like the collateral in other people's problems. I mean, so how do you argue to the board, look, nobody's really going for us, but I've still got to justify this budget?
I've had those discussions with board members and executives, which is, we are a housing association, we're not for profit, we don't hold big payment details, like James's company that's holding credit card information, we don't hold that. And I've had that challenge to me at board. Who would hack us? Why would they want us? And my response to that is always, well, our stakeholders do deal with that. We deal with utility companies, we deal with local authorities, we deal with the NHS, and they may be the direct target, and it could be us that the collateral damage on that. I call them drive-bys. You aren't the intended target, but actually you do get hit by that. And so that's how I pitch that to our board. And again, I always pitch cybersecurity. It's a unique risk in most businesses. Most financial risks, you've got your analysts, you can see them coming over the hill for months and things like that. Cybersecurity is one of those where you could be happily managing your business day to day, and then the next day your business is completely gone and you are operating with zero. And I think it's that healthy paranoia that I managed to put to our board and executives
They
to
are
try
out
and
to
keep.
get you.
Absolutely. I think complacency is a big danger, and I think certainly in my sector, I think I do speak to people who are, we won't get attacked, so I don't need to worry about it as much as other things. Well, actually, I think every organisation, it should be either your number one, number two, or number three corporate risk is cybersecurity. Whatever manufacturer or you know, whatever industry or sector you're in, it should be up there and it should have that board level scrutiny.
So I'm going to carry on with you, but open up. How do you actually go back to the board and say, look, this is increasing threats, and again, the previous speaker was superb in laying it out the sort of, put it down in pounds, shilling and pence. But how do you actually go to the board and say, I'd like to pay for a negative, please? If this is really good, you'll never know it's there. And speaking to a lot of boardroom directors who have come up the financial routes, you can see the mist descend as you start talking about cybersecurity. I have no idea what you're talking about.
I was saying to James earlier on, you know, the measure of success for us is nothing happens. You know, that's a measure of success, that nothing happens. But there is tools that you will all have, sort of that are intruder prevention will probably tell you how many people, you know, are sniffing around your network to be able to get on. And it's that type of thing you can demonstrate to your board and to non-technical people is just because nothing's happened, you can see that there's people on our periphery that do want to get in and do want to attack. And the presentation earlier was really, really good around, you know, there's a financial metric and it's, again, managing cybersecurity is a business risk. If we go down, this is an £11 million hit to this organisation. Where's that money going to come from? And talking pounds, shillings and pence like that really resonates with board, I find, and being able to articulate it into that.
I think it's the what if. It's that reputation, what if Ticket Factory got breached and they got all of our credit cards? That's the end of Ticket Factory. Forget that business. Forget the rest of our business. It's that what if. The financial stuff is great. And yeah, you can get cyber insurance for it. God help us if they ever pay out. But anyway, Marsh, I'm sure, who are our broker. But anyway, I didn't say that. But I think it is talking through that what if. What if Oracle got breached today of the ICC? What if that reputational impact on a company is what those kind of guys think about? The problem is, you say, what if, and I can put things in to help stopping that. And the next question is, does this mean it will never happen? And you're never going to say yes, because you're an idiot if you say yes. You're going to say, well, I'm never going to say we're not going to get a breach or we're not going to get a cyber incident. And that's the difficulty. Absolutely, it's number 1, 2 or 3 on my boards. And I talk through the what if. But the next question is, does that mean it's never going to happen? And I'm never going to say, no, it's never going to happen.
Because you came across it was your analogy, so you bring it forward. It's yours to bring forward.
Well, I'm full of analogies a lot of the time, but I mean, the nature of some attacks can be opportunistic. The nature of some attacks can be targeted. But you think about, say, an opportunistic attack. If you make a real-world analogy, you park your car on the street. A criminal could come along just trying handles to see if anybody's left the car door unlocked. And of course, if you've locked your door, you'll come back to your car later having no idea that anybody might have tried the door handle. But if you'd forgotten to lock the door and your car's no longer there, well, you're immediately going to know about it. So it's the difference between these kind of elements. And try it. Just leave your car unlocked. Just purposefully walk away. I bet you won't be able to do it. You wouldn't feel right. You're going to press the button. You're going to lock the door. It's the same with your house. You walk away from your house. You lock the door. Try it. Just try walking away from your home if it's left unattended, and don't bother locking the door. Don't even close the door. Just leave it and see what happens. You know, you're not going to do that. You're not even going to feel right doing that. It's the same thing with cybersecurity. But of course, this is where the comparisons with the real world start to run out of steam a little bit, because if you leave your car parked on the street, the only criminals that you need to worry about are the ones operating in that area. Whereas on the internet, it's you versus the world. So you've got a lot more to worry about. So this is the sort of thing that you've got to start considering, is what the factors are when you've got to think about that risk and making your risk assessments.
But do you trust the door lock? Or do you put a wheel lock on as well? Or do you put a bar lock as well? Or do you gate it?
Yeah,
or do you put a security guard in there? And that's the problem with cyber, isn't it? Because, I've locked the car, but I ain't got a clue that someone's walked along and they've grabbed my little thing and they've copied it and they've got in my car and off they've driven. So I haven't put a wheel lock on, but I should put a wheel lock on, because that'll stop them doing that.
That's actually a really good point. As somebody who drives a Skoda, I mean, they're quite welcome to steal it. But, Abbie, your thing, because you're the chief executive on this thing, and there is a point, it comes to, you've got to have this, 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 you've got to have this. There comes a point that I can't have it all. I realise cybersecurity is absolute thingy, but will silver plating do rather than gold plating? Because you have other demands on you as well, financial.
Yeah.
How do you actually go about this and say to the other gentleman on the table here, sorry, no, you can't have everything you want.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot of pressures on the business, and I think, but as you quite rightly say, cybersecurity is up there as, you know, when you've got a building like this, for example, you think about terrorist attacks, you think about the building going on fire, you think of all the physical things that could actually happen, and cybersecurity is up there as one of those. I think it's all about measuring the risk and putting, you know, in terms of data, what data do we have that could potentially go? But if we were to, so we're a not-for-profit like yourself, we're owned by a charity, an incident could wipe us out. So we have to make sure that we have everything that we have to protect us. But you're right, you can't go too far. You've got to have those discussions with your IT providers, which we do, in terms of what keeps us as safe as we can be without pushing too much on our financials.
Is that a real concern, though? Basically, you might be concerned that you're basically one blue screen of death away from the business going under.
Yeah, you could be. So there is not 1 week that goes by that my team don't get an email purporting to be me asking to make bank transfers. And those emails are, in the beginning, were like, oh yeah, the email address looks farcical. But now they are absolutely spot on. So it is a real risk. And I think anyone who thinks that their business is either too small or we don't hold the data that they want, I think every business should be concerned about cybersecurity.
Junaid,
I think we need to also understand and acknowledge the fact that this differentiation between physical and digital is blurring as well, quite fast as well. It's good to have businesses like yourselves and NEC here, where maybe there's two kinds of threat. There is threat of losing data, but also now, because of new technologies such as Internet of Things and all that, we're connecting our physical assets to the online world quite fast without really thinking about that they need an additional layer of security as well. For example, you mentioned, James, that sprinklers going off, right? Those kind of things can happen, and we need to think about, you know, those kind of threats as well, which are targeting cyber-physical systems. At a larger, bigger scale, it could be critical national infrastructure, such as your grids, right? Ukraine's been attacked a few times already, right? But it can come down to smaller, you know, businesses as well. For example, the housing, where, you know, a few years ago, there's already been an attack where a large number of IoT devices, IP cameras, were actually hijacked, not for, you know, spying on somebody, but actually creating an arsenal, an army of bots that could then target and take down the internet. And they were successful, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that there's also, businesses need to acknowledge that if they are not digital, as so for say, doesn't mean that they are immune to the cyber threat, because there's new types of threats because of us going digital as well.
So basically, it's like the usual thing. It's sort of just because you're a metal basher in Walsall, you know, that does not mean you're immune to these things, or the threat is simply somebody trying to steal data. You said there's actually a deeper level of threat now.
Yeah, and that I think we need to acknowledge, and like you mentioned earlier, every company has to really understand and conduct a thorough exercise in terms of what their assets are, and putting, like the previous talk said, putting pound values against them to really understand, what can be a consequence of such a successful cyber attack.
David, I saw you nodding vigorously at the moment at that.
Once again, yes, as ever. Yes, it was about the mundanity of a lot of the sources of attack. I think some organisations, the Millennium Points and the NECs of this world, they are going to attract attention at certain points on the calendar. An awful lot of other attacks, I think, end up being opportunistic. There is material out there. And when it finds a surface to attack that is not sufficiently secured, there's an in. And I think an awful lot of the surfaces that those kind of opportunities arise on are older technology. They're harder to secure. They are the alarm systems, the sprinkler systems, the locking mechanisms. They're based on microprocessors that themselves are incredibly difficult to secure. And this takes me back into my dark art, which is contracting and compliance. And, it's not actually a quick solution, but as consumers of these technologies, there is an opportunity for us to start actually managing the procurement process, managing the supply chain, and saying to the supply chain, actually, this needs to move forwards. We need security to be built in rather than laid over the top. We want a midfield and a forward as well as a goalkeeper, please, because we're tired of paying the insurance premiums. They're much more expensive than legal fees. So that's why I was nodding.
Well, that's a very interesting point there. So the idea is, as in when looking through the supply chain, because most people look through the supply chain and think, what happens in terms of interruption? You would argue, rather than just sort of just looking at sheer price points and deliverability, increasingly when commissioning or purchasing equipment or tech, not just tech, anything, basically, can you prove to me its level of security?
And this comes back to culture, but it's not culture in terms of us being senior people within our organisation and working out a campaign to upskill and educate the rest of the workforce. It's culture in other core areas of the business, parts that the likes of Millenium Point and NEC and Progress Housing will manage at group level. The procurement function, the finance function, the internal legal function, if you've got one, all of them need to start taking on board security generally and cybersecurity in particular as being one of the things that they are continually concerned about.
Okay. I'm glad you raised that, because I wanted to come on to the issue of culture. And come to John, if I may. We had this chat a little earlier, which is, show me an organisation that says it doesn't take cybersecurity culture seriously. And I'll show you a business that's going out of thinking. Everybody says they do it. But how do you convince the entire organisation to take board? Particularly from the board level, who sort of, yes, this applies to the troops, but I'm one of the generals. I need my Mac.
I think what you have to do is you treat board members, senior executives, everybody exactly the same. And I think you have to make sure that that is ingrained as part of that cultural piece, is that you are no different. You are a risk to this organisation by, accessing our network. And as I mentioned earlier on, board members traditionally, certainly in housing, were very much, I use my own PC, and it could be a Mac, it could be a laptop, whatever it's going to be. You send me the board papers, which are perhaps the most confidential information that we produce in the organisation, and send it to me. And just trust me that I've got the latest antivirus, to trust me that I'm running the latest operating system. And actually the answer is no. Not that I don't trust you, but I don't trust you. That's the be-all and end-all of it. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to supply you with the equipment, and I'm going to make sure I manage your access onto my network as well, to make sure that I know the antivirus is up to date, I know that the hardware is up to date, and I know that you are adhering to our policies in terms of password policies. Once you start selling that cybersecurity as a risk element, people will be coming on board to that. They will come on board that actually, I cannot be seen as the weakest link in this organisation. I can't be the one that brings this organisation down. And it is down to, you have that one chairperson who's insist on using their mic. You are the weak link. You could take this organisation down and really frame it like that.
So that comes to the usual thing, which is always with culture. It comes from the top downwards, as it were, basically. I set the parameters. But I'm also going to pick on you, Mark. I mean, how big of a problem is it now, and you, Junaid, as well, which is we have an issue with agile working, which brings its own problems. People breaking into, it creates more points of access. But increasingly, the difference between personal and work kit is increasingly blurred. So you get somebody who will use, has gone home, works on a laptop, uses it to bank, but will use their phone also to access work data. I mean, how do you go about creating a culture where multiple points of entry are being created constantly.
Yeah, I mean, this speaks to various different aspects of cybersecurity that have to be evaluated. There's almost sort of like the 5 Ws, the who, what, where, when, and why. Who's having access? Where are they having access from? What are they using to get in? And as you say, that can include their personal devices. Now, BYOD, bring your own device, using your own personal device, can be done securely. The tools are there. And in many cases, people will often already have those tools. You know, if you're using services, cloud services, subscriptions will often come with things like mobile device management capabilities. They just require that they be set up and deployed so that the personal devices are also being subject to the same levels of evaluation that your corporate-owned devices would be, that you can evaluate them, that you can say, we're only going to let these devices be used for access to our applications and our data if we can be assured that they are secure. And with those BYOD technologies that are out there, you can have that level of validation. You can have that level of review over those personal devices that people are using so that you can say, yes, this is secure. And you can extend that to include coverage of data that people might be accessing down to those devices, the way in which they're being used to access applications and software within your environment. You can have that level of monitoring. It does require that it be set up. And it just requires that little bit of extra step to say, okay, well, we're going to set that up. We're going to review that in our environment. We're going to figure out what our policies might be that we're going to put in place to make sure that those gate controls are in place. But this is where we do get to that stage of saying, okay, well, what are the policies going to be? What do we need? And for many small businesses, that requires them to sort of evaluate, well, are we going to set up our own policies from scratch, or are we going to rely on something that's sort of already out there, that's sort of pre-written to a certain degree that we can use? So there's a few decisions that need to be taken there about that.
I'm sure there's a cost involved in that as well. I mean, to physically go round every employee's back bedroom, as it were, and say, this.
Usually not necessarily as severe as that. So if someone's wanting to use their own device, for example, maybe their own smartphone, you might craft some enrollment processes that you can share with employees to say, if you want to use your own phone, download this app, set it up, put in your credentials, and you can then use your phone to have access to corporate data. Those processes also work the other way, because if you're going to sort of say to a person, yep, you can use your own personal phone to have access to corporate data, but you'll need to enroll it, well, that individual might have privacy concerns. They might be sort of thinking, well, if I'm enrolling my phone in your management systems, can you see what's on my phone? Well, in most cases, the answer would be no, because these BYOD systems are also set up to respect the end user's privacy as well. So you can have that exchange. You can say, we'll respect the privacy of your device and what you're doing with it for your personal stuff, but we want to know that it's secure if you're going to be using it to access work services. So that can be managed. That process of enrollment and setup can be managed, and it can give you that two-way exchange of security for the organization, but also privacy for the end user.
Junaid, because I want to come to you, because you were saying that's a great principle, but you've got, basically, as you say, it's going through almost every electronic device in the home is what we're talking about now, through the router, the printer, the toaster, whatever. I mean, that is actually fairly accurate, isn't it?
I think yes, it is, but technology acquisition is important and easy but expensive sometimes. But also the other part of that equation is people who are actually using these devices. David mentioned earlier about the importance of people who are using, who are part of an organization, the employees, right? I think we also need to have a rethink about how we create that culture, how we train, so to say, our people in terms of adhering to cyber hygiene principles. Traditional way seems to be throwing training at people, right? Which is, you can go through now with advanced technology. It is no longer even an in-person thing. It's a video which can, honestly speaking, can play in the background while you're doing other important stuff, right? So we really need to think about how we develop these, these trainings for cyber hygiene as well, and how we engage. I would use the word engage again, yeah? I would engage employees in learning and adopting those cyber hygiene principles in in our daily lives, be it at work, be it also using our personal devices. I think is really, really important now.
Okay. I'm very aware of time, and I can barely see you because of the lights. Does anybody have any questions in the audience? Because mine are stunning, and I've got loads to ask. Ah, there is a gentleman over there. Tell us who you are.
Narinder from Carl Zeiss.
Go on, Narinder.
The question is it about the individual owning security rather than just having a security department somewhere? Because most end users would probably think, okay, security has nothing to do with them, it's the security department that takes care of it, or the CISO or whatever. And, you know, I think it's probably an education piece, whether that be training but the actual individual owning security from the beginning, and that might be on an onboarding process, but then that needs to be throughout.
You've obviously been reading my notes, because that was my next question. Can I ask a question? How do you, from your viewpoint, how do you actually create a sense of personal responsibility amongst staff, rather than sort of, it's the job of the IT department to handle these things, you know, I'm too busy doing the day job to worry about these things. How do you actually devolve responsibility?
I think again, it's about culture of the business. So I think we're probably in a position, because of the size we are, which is much smaller, it's easier to adopt. But we do an awful lot of training with them, and everyone's engaged in what the end result is for the business and want to drive the business forward and see the risks of cybersecurity to the business, and they understand that, and they don't want, especially as a charity, they don't want us to fail. So the culture, we probably maybe overtrain them. We do phishing attacks.
Is that danger?
I don't know. Maybe sometimes they're like, oh, not another one. But we do phishing attacks to see how they go, and they shock a few people, and then they're like, oh yeah, I could see how. So I think it's culture. Yeah. It is culture.
John, how do you go? Because obviously you say a lot of your workforce is dispersed. I mean,
It is.
do you do phishing attacks, and do you have a wall of shame?
We do the same. We have social engineering tests, and we try and make him, trying to explain him, we're not trying to fool people, but we are trying to fool people. You know, we want to make it as difficult as possible, make it as real world as possible, so we simulate logging onto Microsoft and things like that. But no, we don't use it as a name and shame. What we do is as a training piece, an education piece. So if somebody does enter their credentials into the fake site, it immediately splashes up and says, you know, you've entered your details into a phishing site. This is an error, and we feed that back into the learning development team, so we can take people on a journey. I think it be counterproductive to, you know. John Cocker, he was number one pressing all the buttons this week. I think that be counterproductive.
Fool of the month was.
Absolutely, it should be. You know, it should be about bringing people on board rather than, you know, shaming people, I think, is the way to do it.
Because you said basically, I think it's almost like snakes and ladders at your place.
Yeah, so culture. So our culture might be slightly different, is that we do phishing attacks and things like that. Depending on the role you're in the organisation, if you fail a phishing attack, you're locked out. You go back and you do your e-learning and you redo your training. Now we've got 3,000 employees, 2,500 are zeros and casuals, but 500 of them could impact our business. And the point's exactly right, that it is personal responsibility to take cyber risk to heart. And we do cyber incidents. Everyone will have a cyber test once a year, and if they fail it, they go back and do their e-learning.
Okay, right. Any last questions? Gentleman over here in the centre. Okay, tell us who you are and...
Yes, my name's Joshua from Air Charter Service. And I was thinking, so I don't know about most people here, but I don't know if every single company has got like a CISO or a dedicated cybersecurity team. And I was thinking, I don't know if you guys would sort of advise on that. How important do you think is having a CISO or a specific team? Because most of us, we all probably have different sizes of companies, can't do it by yourselves. You know, you can have all the systems, but you configure, you have an IT team, an infrastructure team, you do a lot of things, but how important is it saying, okay, well, let's get a CISO who has 25 years experience, who has, you know, lots of time to also plan and structure and strategize. So what do you think about that?
You want to take this one on?
Yeah,
So at Probrand, we support a wide range of different types of customer, including customers that are so small they don't even have an IT manager, let alone an IT team. Certainly not going to have a dedicated cybersecurity department or a dedicated head of cybersecurity. So there's a whole range of different things that come into play depending on the size of your organization. One of the challenges that I alluded to before was, around the policies, what kind of standards are you going to embrace? And if you don't have that capability internally to sort of design your own cybersecurity policy, you might need to look to something that's already out there. You might look towards things like Cyber Essentials, for example, and gain that accreditation, because you don't need to roll that cybersecurity standard. It already exists. You can get to work straight away, auditing against that to figure out where your cyber threats are, where your risks are, how you can improve your cybersecurity and bring things up to scratch. You might decide to embrace other standards depending on the size of your organization. Some of the ISO standards that are out there, for example, there's plenty of these things that you can look towards. When it comes to ongoing monitoring, ongoing assessment of your environment, you don't necessarily need to be running your own internal department to be acting as a kind of operations center for security. This is also something that could potentially be outsourced. You can outsource that ongoing monitoring of your security, have it as a managed service so that that's being continuously assessed all the time without the need to necessarily be trying to hire in your own CISO or set up your own cybersecurity team internally, your own department. If you're not able to get to the level of having ongoing continuous monitoring, you might look at that more as a point-in-time thing, the sort of annual penetration test or the quarterly audit of your security. There's various different things that might sit somewhere in the middle depending on your budgets, because to speak to your point earlier, you still have to be realistic about budgets about a lot of these things. Is what can you afford, what can you invest in? But the standards, you don't have to necessarily be rolling your own. These things are already out there. The ongoing monitoring and managed services can be taken advantage of, and the point-in-time auditing, if you're looking at that, these things can be done and outsourced as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be done internally.
Right. I'm going to call a halt to it there, I'm afraid, because unashamedly, one, I'm aware that we have other speakers after. We also have one speaker who has to catch a train very urgently. So I'd like to thank Probrand for organising this morning. If you want to see me afterwards about a copy of this, report on this with the next edition of Insider magazine. If you want to get a copy, come and see me afterwards. But most of all, would you applaud the panel, please?